The chandelier over the community hall looked like a frozen storm, every crystal holding a small, bright panic. At the far end of the room, a projection screen flickered between the welcome slide and a pale desktop. Someone had forgotten to hide their battery indicator, and the red sliver glared like a wound. My brother Adnan practiced his toast at the mic in a half-whisper he believed no one could hear, shaping the air as if it belonged to him. To love that multiplies, to family that always shows up. Behind him, tables waited, a forest of silverware, ivory cloth, and the kind of glassware you can balance on 2 fingers if you're gentle and sure. I had been both today, gentle and sure. And also something else that would only become obvious when the champagne didn't arrive. You don't expect silence to have a temperature, but this one did. It was cool from the air vents and warmer at the edges, where people had rushed in from the October heat and were still drying. I could smell starch from fresh linens and a late delivery of lilies. There was a faint hint of roast almonds from the kitchen they shouldn't have opened yet. The MC checked his watch and gave me a look that asked nothing and promised less. I nodded back, the small nod that says, "It's handled." What was at stake tonight wasn't just a toast. It was my reputation as the planner who fixes things better than they were, the sister who never misses, the executor of details who can make money behave. People don't say that last part out loud. They say I'm organized, a word that gets used when women move mountains without shouting. If the next minutes unfolded as they would, you'd see how organization becomes power when it is documented, notarized, countersigned, timestamped. How it is not loud so much as it is final. The first micro-mystery. A navy envelope resting inside the podium. The flap tucked, not sealed, addressed to me in our mother's hand. The second, the embossed place card missing at table 7. Right where my aunt, who never misses anything that isn't about her, was supposed to sit. These were small absences, like commas mislaid in a long sentence. But I had learned to read absences. "Sound check," Adnan said again, clearing his throat. My future sister-in-law Hira moved between tables in a dress that folded the light like milk. She would look back on tonight for the rest of her life either as the moment the floor broke or the moment the roof held. And I, as always, was the roof. They had borrowed my budget for the champagne. Borrowed is a clean word for a dirty thing. The transfer out of the event account happened at 2:13 a.m. on a Monday, the kind of hour that likes secrets dragging the line item grand. Kujeroboam's X, 6 inches into a negative that hummed like a tuning fork. I found it on Tuesday, a familiar name in the memo, Haji Colony for Nayafo. Adnan's voice had been boyish when I confronted him over coffee. He'd touched the rim of his cup as if it would tell him the right answer. "We needed the sofa set for the new house," he said. "Champagne is just bubbles. Furniture is solid." He said it as if solidity were a moral position. I didn't shout. I never shout. I used process and receipts. The champagne had been my gift. Not cheap, not showy. Chosen with care and confirmed with 2 calls and a tasting that made the manager of desks. And if you're using like a scanner, if Les Ed Toils, write my name on the back of a business card and underline it twice. The bottles were to arrive at 6:20 p.m. Rest for exactly 20 minutes in an ice bath, and open with a practiced thumb at 6:45 just in time for the first toast. The sound of 6 corks, like a whisper turning into rain. On Wednesday, after that coffee, I reversed the delivery and rescinded the deposit. On Thursday, I filed a hold with the bank on any attempt to move funds from my account without dual authorization and escalation of a clause. I'd added, after learning the first time love borrowed from me, what it couldn't return. On Friday, I met with the community hall manager, Samina, and executed a small amendment to our vendor access list. Kitchen entry by wristband only, the same blue as my dress. And this morning, I notarized a letter explaining that the deposit had been canceled by the account holder. That is, mean that any vendor claiming otherwise would be cited for attempting to fraud a client. Under Clause 14(2) of the event contract. It sounds cold. It was exact. The hall kept filling. My mother arranged her bangles and pretended she didn't notice her son's not speaking. She had written a line once in a scold that arrived with tea. Family is duty, not debt. I'd folded that paper into 4 and tucked it behind a bus card in my wallet. I could feel its rectangle now against my palm, as if it had temperature too. A junior cousin hovered near the projector with a cable in his hand. The old male itched to fix things that aren't broken, making him dangerous. I gestured for him to drop it, and he did, reluctantly. Behind the kitchen doors, politely defiant clatter. The head of catering, a square woman named Mariam, who knew where every spoon in the city had been, had already asked me twice, "Are you sure about the champagne delay?" "It's not a delay," I'd said. "It's a substitution. We'll go to sparkling water, cordial, and the mocktail station first. Champagne comes when it comes. And if it doesn't?" she'd asked. I'd smiled the smile that looks like permission and is actually policy. "Then it doesn't." A single line landed in my head and would not leave, shaped like a bruise and polished like a gem. "Seems I'm not family." The lilies softened as the room warmed. The aircon hummed, a low, steady discipline. Light from the chandelier scattered itself across faces and shoes and the chrome of service trays. When the first of the VIPs arrived here as uncle from the ministry, the corporate sponsor for the charity she runs, the couple that owns the bakery, everyone's mother trusts my father, straightened his jacket and looked at me the way he looks at flight information, assured that it will take him where he's going, hoping he won't have to run. 5 days earlier, the original insult had been quieter. Adnan and I had gone to look at chairs. He'd made a show of pretending to be bored, but he had opinions about upholstery buttons and leg taper. He liked to perform his taste as a kind of rebellion against our childhood plainness. He left me to finalize the rentals while he took a call, and when I met him outside, the exact sum of the champagne deposit had already moved. A neat transfer with a memo that tried to be honest, will return after honeymoon. The dishonesty lives in the will, not the after. I stared at the bank log on my phone while a taxi honked at nothing and an old man selling combs counted his coins twice. When I looked up, Adnan was already telling me why this was fair household marriage priority. "What do you need champagne for?" he said. "People drink for a second, then forget. They will remember the sofa." At times like that, I hear not words, but weights. What weighs more, a toast or a couch? What weighs more, the history of my yeses or one clean, durable no? I walked away without replying. The sun pressed hard on my scalp. Later that night, at my desk, I made the first call to Les Toils and the manager. Fareed said, "You want to cancel?" "Everything's confirmed." "I want to reverse and record," I said. "Send me the reversal email and credit note with the wire confirmation attached. I'll need both for the audit trail." I heard his respect grow like a careful flower. "Of course," he said. "I'll timestamp for you." The email arrived 2 minutes later. Subject reversal. Order #la-77351 Anilla B. Body clear. Attachments correct? I saved it to a folder I named simply Champagne Cancelled. After, I drafted a short, precise message to our family group. "Hey all, small change, champagne toast, moved to end of dinner for logistical reasons. Don't worry about it, mocktails on entry. Something stronger later for those who want it at the after party." I watched the read receipts appear, blue check marks lining up like little soldiers. Hira responded with a heart. My mother sent us silent prayer hands. Adnan sent nothing that night, and only at noon the next day did he write, "We can cover it if you need." I replied, "No need, covered." At the bank, Amina, the manager who still takes pride in her stamp, called me into her office. I had prepared account numbers, printouts, and a slim silver pen. "I want to set a dual authorization for any transaction over $50,000 from my event accounts," I said, "and I want to record a memo on that specific transfer." "Not dispute record." She nodded, appreciating the distinction. "If he tries to pull it back?" "He won't," I said, "because I'll be watching." She smiled then, small and sharp. She printed the form. I signed, she countersigned. We both watched the clerk slide the paper into the scanner and then the file drawer. the little noises of bureaucracy like a lullaby I had taught myself to love. By Thursday, my ally list had taken shape. Fareed at Les at Toils, Amina at the bank, Miriam in catering, Samina, the hall manager, who agreed to reissue access with the wristbands after I explained the last-minute vendor shift and printed a quick ledger of who would now deliver when. I also spoke to a neighbor, Uncle Naveed, who has that kind of eyes-down authority old engineers wore, a man who once oversaw the installation of a turbine and still moves his hands in elegant circles. He agreed to sit near the entrance and help intercept any confusion. Think of it as ushering a current, he said, and I believed him. The thing about competence is that it doesn't look like much from the outside. It looks like lists and quiet phone calls, and a refusal to accept that later is a time. It looks like a calm face. Inside, it feels like a spine made of ledger lines. Open loops accumulated because they always do. The navy envelope in the podium. The missing place card. The question of whether Adnan would announce something grand and untrue. The contact in my phone saved under just V. His full name I had not needed to know yet because his job was to pull records late and clean. An unexplained scripted phrase I had heard Hira's mother practice under her breath. We owe our blessings to those who raised us and those who stand with us now. As if there were some debt arithmetic about to be performed in public. I held these loops the way a locksmith holds keys. Not yet used, already known. When guests had settled and someone dimmed the house lights by a fraction, the MC tapped the mic and said we'd begin with a welcome. Then Hiro's mother would speak, then dinner, then the toasts. Adnan looked toward the kitchen with a small compulsive hunger. He wanted the corks, the rain, the sound of money making itself heard. I lifted my bag, the navy leather one that sits up on its own, and walked to the corridor that leads to the back offices. The hall smelled like wood polish and printer toner. Samina's office door was ajar. Inside, the printers made their soft animal grunts. On her desk, all our contracts sat in a neat stack. Everything as you requested, she said, passing me a copied page with a hypnotic satisfaction. Clause 9. 1 amended entry by wristband. Deliveries confirm with Anila only. Signed, stamped. I traced the ink with a finger, not quite touching. The blue looked exactly like the dress against my skin. In the kitchen, the air was humid and sharp with garlic and cardamom. Miriam stood over a list, calling times and quantities. Mocktails ready? She asked me without looking up. I nodded. We pour on my count. And I shook my head, and she didn't finish the word champagne, which felt considerate, like she had closed a window against dust. On my way back into the hall, I passed my mother, who was fixing a flower at the edge of a centerpiece. Making the unnecessary necessary by touch. You look like your aunt when you set your jaw like that, she said without accusation. Which aunt? The one who made a school out of a courtyard. The one whose temper was the insistence that things could be better. I breathed in the lily sugar and the cotton of her dupatta and went to my seat. At table 3, the corporate sponsor talked softly about a grant cycle while scanning the room for a camera. At table 9, 2 teenagers practiced being older by pretending to understand the wine list we would not be using. My phone buzzed on the table, a name with a single letter, V. I let it buzz twice, then picked up. Your recording is ready, he said. Call last night, 9 minutes from number ending in 41. Conversation with Haji Kolani Furniture. He said the word sister 4 times, which felt strategic. Send me the file, I said. And the summary. 10 seconds later, subject line, call 2117, a Haji colony. Transcript attached. An audio file. Key phrases highlighted in yellow. I listened to 3 seconds the voice of Adnan saying, my sister will understand, and closed it with a clean thumb. Understanding is not the same as consenting. People always forget that. When Hera's mother stood to speak, the hall obediently dropped into hush. She is a beautiful woman, soft-spoken in a way that makes people forgive her for being exact. She thanked everyone with the practiced gratitude of women who have hosted more dinners than anyone has counted. Then she said the line she had rehearsed. About blessings owed to those who raised and those who stand now, and her eyes moved not accidentally to where I sat. She wanted to triangulate debt as love, to make the map of who paid for what feel like a proof of who loves whom. The strange relief was that I didn't have to correct her. Receipts would. Dinner began. The kitchen moved like a well-rehearsed hand. Plates circled, whispers smoothed. A child laughed and swallowed it because it didn't belong to this moment. When the MC announced the toasts to come, I caught Miriam's eye and lifted a finger. She nodded to her team. On the drink station, tall glass dispensers glowed with a light trapped inside citrus slices. Clear flutes waited, their thin stems making them look fragile and braver than they were. Adnan clinked a spoon against a glass. The sound ran up into the chandelier and came back down like a spun coin. He smiled, rehearsed, sincere enough for those who wanted it. Tonight, he began, we celebrate love, family, and all the people who made this day possible. My sister, he gestured toward me with a small flourish, has been the architect of this evening. She even insisted on the most perfect champagne. But before we pour, he raised his hand toward the kitchen corridor. I want to say thank you. The emptiness that followed was beautiful. Not the absence of something, but the presence of an exactly arranged space. The servers did not appear with buckets. No corks loosened the air. There were flutes, yes, but they were filled with the light off the chandeliers and nothing else. In silence, you can hear fabric. Hira's dress made a sound like a page being turned carefully. My father coughed a cough that asked to be ignored. Across the room, Samina shifted her weight. The floor believed her. I stood, not fast and not slow. We'll begin with sparkling and cordial, I said. My voice did what it was trained to do. Carry just enough. The champagne toast is cancelled. A small word detonated. Not postponed. Not delayed, cancelled. The room wobbled for a second, as if everyone had been sitting on a bus and the driver touched the brakes lightly at high speed. Adnan smiled a bewildered host's smile. A little joke, he said. We have champagne, everyone, don't worry. He turned to the kitchen and lifted his chin, a man signaling a flock he believed was his. Nothing moved. He looked back at me, and I saw the boy underneath the tux wounded, entitled. Surprised that the lever he'd always pulled did not operate this machine. Anila, he said softly, not for the room, for me. We have bottles, right? We had bottles, I said. Then you moved to the money. A ripple. People pretend not to listen, and they always listen. He laughed once, the laugh that negotiates. Come on. You know, we needed that for the furniture. He leaned toward the mic as if the mic were me. The sofa is for the home. Champagne is for a moment. The home will have to remember the moment it took, I said. The bottles were paid for and then the money was transferred. I reversed the order and rescinded my deposit. It was recorded, time-stamped, and acknowledged by the vendor. There won't be a toast. I lifted my phone, not as a threat, but as a published thing. If you insist, we can read the transaction aloud. In the back, the police sergeant, who had been invited by my father out of some old habit of inviting authority to make gatherings, Safer shifted in his chair. Not a threat, a witness. The bank manager's card in my bag was heavier than paper. Adnan swallowed his charm. This is not the place, he said. This is exactly the place, I said, still calm, still not raising my voice. We are at a celebration funded by promises. It is appropriate to account for them. I kept my eyes on Hira, who had gone very still. You deserve to know, and you do. Tonight is not broken. It is corrected. He tried another move. We'll pay you back after the honeymoon, he said, and a few heads nodded by reflex, the way heads nod to after. The reversal email is in my archive, I said. The credit note shows the wire was canceled and the funds returned to my account. A hold is filed on transfers above $50,000 without my signature. Kitchen access is recorded by wristband. The deliveries are logged. If you would like to dispute any of this, we can do it in writing. Otherwise, we will proceed with dinner and mocktails and leave the bubbles for later in life when they aren't financed by theft. A little murmur, indrawn and satisfied, crossed the room like a breeze that knows which faces to cool. The MC, to his credit, said nothing. Silence, after all, is a container if you let it be. Haraz's mother stood again, her eyes wide in that complicated way mother's eyes get when money and children make a knot. "Perhaps we should," she began. "We should eat," Hira said, voice clean. "And we should thank Anila for making sure everything here is real." A server, brave and nameless, took this as a cue and began to pour the sparkling water. The fizz sounded like rain from another country. Glasses filled. Shoulders dropped. The room shrank to a size that fit. Adnan, who had not yet learned how to bow without being seen, made his last attempt. "Anila, can we speak outside?" he asked. I looked at the navy envelope glinting in the podium and then back at him. "We can," I said. After the speeches, he stood where he was, tethered to that mic, and said the toast he'd rehearsed. It landed with a thud you could ignore if you loved him. Many people do. When he finished, my father asked to speak, which he rarely does at length. He is not a man who enjoys the front of rooms. He cleared his throat. "Our daughter," he said, "does not like being thanked. She prefers things to work." He paused and looked at his shoes, then up at us, his family and the many versions of us assembled here as witnesses. "Tonight they work." He lifted a glass of sparkling water. Two things that work. Everyone drank this time. The faux citrus bite stung pleasantly. The cold moved through me like a yes. After dinner, I walked to the podium and slid the navy envelope into my bag without opening it. Some mysteries are better paid off when the room is different. On my way back to table 5, I passed Adnan. He reached out and caught my wrist. Not hard, but with that old brother claim, the first ownership we all learn. "You embarrassed me," he said. "You stole from me," I said. He blinked, almost offended by the arithmetic. "It was our family," he said. The line moved through me again, as inevitable as tide. "Seems I'm not family." We stepped into the corridor. The air cooler here, the hum of the building louder, the smell of floor cleaner and paper. He leaned against the wall and folded his arms like a teenager who had borrowed a tuxedo. "You made me look like an idiot," he said. "No," I said. "I made you look like you. You did the rest." He stared. Then his shoulders dropped. He tried something like contrition, but the edges were wrong. "I'll transfer it back," he said. "On Monday. We'll call the champagne people and reorder." "You'll transfer it back tonight," I said. "Not because we're reordering. Because you don't fund your home by raiding your sister's gift. And you'll send me a confirmation with the wire ID. And if I don't?" I let the quiet sit there for exactly as long as it takes to count backward from 7. Then I file a formal complaint with the bank for unauthorized access. We open the call recording from last night with Haji Colony Furniture. I send a copy of the event contract to the charity board Hira sits on. As it references the sponsorship letter that includes my commitments, and I forward the lot to your new landlord who asks for proof of funds in 3 days. I smiled because it was the polite thing to do. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm documenting." His face went through something like weather. "You wouldn't," he said. "I would," I said, "because I love you enough to give you a boundary." He lowered his head. "Fine," he said. "Tonight." He paused. "But you could have told me. You could have warned me before you canceled." "I did," I said. "I warned you when I became a person who writes things down. You chose not to translate." When I returned to the hall, the light felt kinder. The music had found its correct volume, the level at which conversation sits inside it instead of fighting with it. Children, released from adult attention, formed a small pack and negotiated a dessert heist with all the seriousness of diplomats. Hira found me and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For refusing to make me start a marriage on a lie," she said. I wanted to argue that it wasn't my job to police truth, but as strange. Generous certainty had landed somewhere under my clavicle. "You're welcome," I said. One-line punch, we were both choosing a different kind of solid. By the time Adnan's transfer confirmation arrived on my phone, 7:51 p.m. Wire ID ending in 938. Subject return of funds household. The hall had recalibrated. Toasts turned to stories, the kind that pull new families tighter and in the same direction. I sat when asked and stood when I felt like it, and did not open the navy envelope until much later. After we had watched the couple dance to a song heavy with violins and easy promises, in the restroom, I washed my hands longer than necessary, felt the cold of the water and the cheap rose soap, watched a woman fix her lipstick with a small reverent concentration. Then, in a stall with the door latched, I opened the envelope. Inside a single sheet, my mother's precise handwriting, the same sentence from years ago and a new one under it. Family is duty, not debt. If they make you pay for love, pay it to yourself. I folded it again and slipped it into my bag, where it took its rightful place beside credit notes and contracts and a small bar of chocolate I'd forgotten. The smell of lilies had followed me. Even here, it was gentle and insistent. I touched the paper once more just to make sure it was real and went back out. The after-party moved to a rooftop where the city threw its light up at the sky and the sky pretended not to care. Hira's charity friends danced like their grant applications had all been approved. Someone had found a case of good soda and was mixing mocktails with a concentration usually reserved for physics. Adnan kept his distance, which was wise. When he approached finally, it was with Hira, whose chin lifted a millimeter when she is about to insist on the right thing. "We want to apologize," he said. "That we tried to make the apology heavier and lighter at once." "You should apologize to yourself," I said to Hira. "He will apologize to me when he has receipts." He took the cue. "I'm sorry," he said. "I took money I shouldn't have taken. I thought. I justified it. I'm returning it tonight." "Already returned," I said. He nodded. "Already returned," he repeated, as if learning a second language. "I'm changing the joint lock on the new apartment," Hira said. And I looked at her with the kind of respect that equals trust. "Keys will be distributed as needed," she added, dry. "Good," I said. "Include a letter with them. Boundaries read better when they're written." We stood near the railing while a breeze moved across the roof, carrying the smell of cardamom from a late chai vendor on the street below. The air had the clean feel it gets when a storm has already happened somewhere else. Light smeared itself on the glass of nearby buildings. Down in the hall, the staff were stacking chairs with their quiet, enormous competence. I thought about sending a thank you message to Mariam and Samina immediately, but decided to wait until morning to respect their off. Our offer's justice includes letting people rest. Over the next days, the ripples found their borders. Amina at the bank called to confirm that the dual authorization would be recorded on all my event accounts and sent me a PDF with the metadata showing creation time and the last 2 access attempts. I saved it with a name that would find itself easily later. Authorization, dual recorded, for read from Laissez Toils. Sent a polite note, hoping to work together again, and attached a small discount voucher for someone who understands process, he wrote. And I smiled without using the muscles on my face. Samina emailed a short survey about the hall and added a line about how gracefully the evening had been handled despite unexpected changes. Her way of saying she likes working with me and will fight for my dates next season. Hira texted twice, once to ask for a copy of the vendor access amendment, which I sent, once to ask if I knew a good auditor for the charity's new sponsorship guidelines. I replied with a name and a caveat about rates. She sent back a gif of someone stamping a document decisively. The city continued being itself, loud, forgiving, true. Adnan, to his credit, arranged to repay me not just the deposit but the bank fee for the transfer and a small amount for my time, which he insisted on itemizing hilariously as if I were a contractor he had hired to be his conscience. I accepted because sometimes grace is letting someone behave as if they're better already so they can grow into it. He came by our parents' house with a cake as if sweetness could be notarized. I ate a slice because cake is never the enemy. Then I gave him a copy of a letter I had drafted and filed in a quiet folder called Family Boundaries. It specified that I would no longer act as financial backstop for any household decisions he made. That gifts would be defined and respected. That any access to my accounts required dual authorization. that I reserved the right to revoke event planning services for personal events if basic financial protocols weren't honored. He read it out loud, stumbled over revoke, and then signed with a pen my father had bought when he got his promotion in '94. I signed. Our mother signed as witness. We dated it, and I scanned it, and then we ate more cake. The community hall posted photos, as they do, and dinner guests tagged themselves in selfies where their eyes looked forgiven. Under one of Hira's pictures, her aunt wrote, "Most elegant celebration without excess." The without was a small satisfaction. A code that said we had avoided the sin our people sense horror in and inexplicably still commission, showing off. 2 weeks later, the Navy envelope found me again. Not the paper, but what it meant. I was in a small municipal office registering a new business account for the event. Consultancy I'd been threatening to start for years. The clerk took my forms and said, "Your documents are the only ones I've seen this week that weren't missing anything." He stamped the page and slid it back with respect. I thought about the lily smell, the clean knock of the corks that never were, the precise click of the scanner lid when Amina filed our form, the slick feel of the podium's lacquer under my fingers as I slipped the envelope into my bag. A friend texted asking if I wanted to do a small wedding in March. "But only if you'll do it like you did your brothers without lies," she wrote. I said yes, and then opened a spreadsheet because often the feeling of being alive is a column. You freeze at the top so the rest can move without losing you. On a Sunday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with sunlight laid out like a pale scarf and a fan ticking overhead, I drafted a policy I titled Gifts Definition and Conduct. It was simple. A gift has no strings. A gift is not reclaimed. A gift is recorded. A gift can be refused. A gift that becomes a lever is no longer a gift. I printed it and taped it inside a cupboard where I keep flour and lentils and the kind of dried red chilies that make their will known in the pan. Every time I reached for something simple and necessary, I read it and felt the future close in a click that sounded oddly like cork. 3 months later, at a community hall, different but similar, I watched a couple exchange vows that were not the slogans you find online, but sentences they had written about the exact shape of their days. When it was time for the toast, we lifted glasses of lemonade and water and tea because it was the afternoon and no one was in the mood to perform intoxication. A few guests missed the bubbles. Most did not. I stood in the back with Mariam, who had taken to texting me photos of well-set tables as if they were grandchildren. "Remember your brothers?" She said. "I do," I said. It was the night we all learned how expensive a lie is. "And how cheap truth is if you buy it early," she added, and we both laughed the small, quiet laugh that belongs to women who have stacked chairs and dreams and somehow managed not to bruise either. I still see Adnan often. He is not a villain. He is a man with a wallet that thinks it's the center of his body. He has learned to ask before he moves. Sometimes he forgets and then remembers mid-sentence. He and Hira fight softly now about curtains and calendars, and then come over for doll and stay to watch my old TV, which hums the way old televisions do, flattering everyone. Occasionally, when a bottle appears at a dinner sent over by a thankful client, opened by a server with a twist that sounds older than all of us, he catches my eye and shrugs with a grin that says he knows the joke and it's mostly on him. We pour for others, not for ourselves. We lift the glasses and do not say anything like forever because we don't believe in that anymore. We believe in recorded, transferred, frozen, audited, certified, witnessed. We believe in the moment and the receipt. Some nights alone, I wear the blue dress again and the wristband is still in the pocket. I touch it and remember the room resizing when Hira thanked me. The way the air found a nicer way to sit on skin. The slight shock of not being family and being okay. I don't keep the bracelet as a trophy. I keep it as a verb. On the anniversary of their wedding, a small envelope arrived with no return address. Inside, a single place card, embossed with the hall's crest, for table 7, the one that had been empty that night. In Hira's small, efficient hand, it said simply Anila. I put it on my desk, leaned against a cup of pens, and felt something in my throat I don't often indulge. The missing had been returned, not repaired, and that distinction felt like luxury. I do not need champagne to measure joy. I measure it by processes that protect tenderness. I measure it by the light on a clean table. The quiet in a kitchen after the last pot is dried. The certainty that when I hand someone a glass full of whatever, they choose it is theirs without condition. I have made a life out of that certainty. It is unglamorous. It is an expensive kind of peace paid in forms and stamps, and the 2 minutes it takes to reread a clause. It is worth everything. When people ask me what happened at my brother's wedding, I tell them the truth in 2 lines. I canceled the champagne deposit because the money was stolen. We poured what we had, and somehow it tasted like respect. After that night, when a cousin cornered me at a baby shower and tried to build a new family myth that skipped the part where the theft happened, the champagne thing. Just a logistical hiccup. I looked her in the face and said, "It wasn't logistics. It was policy." She blinked and changed the subject to napkins. I didn't mind. Policy has its own gravity. You don't have to sell it. You write it down and keep living, and people come to the table or they don't. At a different rooftop some months later, just before monsoon, I stood with my neighbor, Uncle Naveed, and watched the wind pull a sheet off a pedestrian bridge like it was finally time for it to breathe. He sipped tea and said, "Circuits need resistors, otherwise they burn." I told him I'd been called worse. He chuckled and patted my shoulder, and we watched the city light itself up in 1,000 small squares. I went home and wrote a letter to myself on the first page of a new notebook, in the neat, unornamented writing my teachers liked. Boundary, a gift you give yourself that makes loving others safer. I dated it. I signed it. I put it under the navy envelope and the place card and the policy printout. On the shelf above, the flour and lentils kept their quiet. The fan kept time. Outside, a motorcycle went by with too many passengers and exactly enough hope. If one day I host another celebration and someone asks about champagne, I will smile and say, "We have better things to drink." And if they insist, I will show them the clause, the wire ID, the credit note, the recorded, rescinded, executed, certified sequence by which a woman insisted that love is not a cash drawer. It is a table where the glasses stand ready and clean, and what fills them is chosen, not stolen. And if the room overhears me say, almost under my breath, but clearly enough to be recorded by whatever small God keeps records of these things, seems I'm not family, it will mean something else this time. It will mean I have chosen my family, and it includes me. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs proof that boundaries can be elegant. Want another dignified justice tale, or to tailor one to your own prompt? Tell me your title and setting, and I'll build you a roof that holds.